let's go live there now.
As many questions as you like, and some of the details that some of you have mentioned in your articles that you think we need a bit more detail. So, Minister of the Presidency, if I could invite you to come forward and take over, please, sir. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Karen, DDG, for this opportunity. Good day, is it? What time is it now? Good afternoon. Good afternoon, colleagues. Various media houses, let's thank you again. Further reinforce that from Mike for actually responding as you usually do. Before I introduce the ministers, I will first read the statement. As you all are aware, President Cyril Ramaphosa addressed the nation on Monday, 25th July 2022, where he announced an unprecedented set of interventions to end load shedding and achieve energy security. Load shedding is the single biggest constraint on South Africa's economic growth. Government is taking bold steps both to address the immediate crisis and to make load shedding a thing of the past. Further, we are mobilizing all of the resources at our disposal and will do whatever it takes to achieve energy security. I must emphasize that achieving energy security is our single most important objective as a country to enable economic growth and job creation. Our short-term objective is to reduce the severity and frequency of load shedding through immediate measures to stabilize the energy system. Our long-term objective is to end load shedding and secure energy security and secure energy for the country. I beg your pardon. In this regard, government will focus on the following. First, improving the performance of Eskom's existing power station. Secondly, adding as much new generation capacity to the grid as possible, as quickly as possible. To this end, the President established the National Energy Crisis Committee, comprising of all relevant government departments and Eskom, led by the Director General in the Presidency, Ms. Phindile Baleni. This structure reports to an interministerial committee, which will be chaired by the President and comprises the Minister in the Presidency, the Minister of Mineral and Resources and Energy, the Minister of Public Enterprise, the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment, and the Minister of Trade and Competition. Several options have already been taken to address the shortfall in electricity supply, which is the main cause of load shedding. Some of these actions include, first, changes have been made to regulations on new generation capacity to allow municipalities to procure power independently. As a result, several municipalities are in the process of procuring additional power. One of the first steps President Cyril Ramaphosa took was to revive the renewable energy procurement program. This enabled 2,205 megawatts from the bid window 4 to proceed to construction, the majority of which has now been connected to the grid. A further 6,800 megawatts of solar PV and wind power is being procured in terms of the current ministerial determination. This additional generation capacity will connect to the grid from late 2023. Another 3,000 megawatts of gas and 513 of battery storage will be procured through the next bid windows. In 2021, we raised the licensing threshold from 1 megawatts to 100 megawatts. This has resulted in a pipeline of more than 80 confirmed private sector projects under development with a combined capacity of over 6,000 megawatts, several of which will commence construction this year. Eskom has established an independent transmission company and is on track to separate its generation and distribution businesses by the end of 2022. These are just few examples of the intervention government has already put in place. However, we recognize that we need to be responsive to the situation as it develops. The severe load shedding which we experienced last month showed that additional actions are necessary to restore system stability and increase generation capacity. Today, the ministers will be unpacking, depending on the questions that the floor raises, in more detail as we outline the next step to ensure effective implementation. The plan announced by the President includes the 5 interventions with specific actions and timeframes to address the electricity shortfall. Here are these 5 action interventions. 1, fix ESCOM and improve the availability of existing supply, enable and accelerate private investment in the generation capacity, accelerate procurement of new capacity from renewables, gas and battery storage. 4, unleash businesses and households to invest in rooftop solar. 5, fundamentally transform the electricity sector to achieve long-term energy security. The Crisis Committee has already begun to meet regularly to ensure that these actions are implemented swiftly. 8 work streams have been established to ensure coordination across government, and discussions are underway with private sector and other social partners to ensure that the best available expertise in the country is brought to this effort. The safety and security work stream under the energy net joints have already made progress in tackling sabotage, theft and fraud at ESCOM power station and other key installations. As the President said in his address to the nation, if I open quote, the crisis that we are facing requires that we should take bold, courageous, and decisive action to close the electricity gap. Close quote. This is our overriding objective as government. At this point in time, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to go straight. This is an assumption that, this is based on the assumption that the plan has been read by you several times. The ministers are here to respond to whatever questions that emanate from you reading the plan. If I start from my right, not politically, is Minister Patel, Trade and Industry, followed by Minister Kele, South African Police Service, followed by Minister Godongwana, Minister of Finance, followed by Minister Gordon, Public Enterprise, followed by Minister Montash, Mineral, Resource and Energy, followed by Minister Chrissy, Environment, Fishery and Forestry. If I left anything, you will fill in, Minister Bob.
Not yet.
Now, colleagues, we are business in our approach. We want to spend most of the time interacting with your questions. You can shoot. If we can take the first round.
Good afternoon.
Yes.
So far, we don't have any questions.
All of you?
Or online, on WhatsApp.
Online, okay. Or online, there are no questions. But I suspect here there are questions. Unless the President was too clear. Yes? Looks like Govern. Govern.
So much that's Governor from ENCA. Obviously, this is a plan for emergency procurement of additional generation capacity.
You can't hear you, Govern. Speak up.
I'd like to know how much additional generation capacity would be procured in the short term to immediately address ESCOM's shortage. And from the different avenues of procurement, the private sector, fixing ESCOM, the IPPs, the rolling out of more power lines, which of these mechanisms would be utilized first or has been utilized already, and how much is it brought on in additional capacity?
Is that all, Governor?
No, Minister. I've still got...
Okay, come. Because you're alone, come with more of your questions if you have.
All right, thank you. The plan also suggests the extension of ESCOM power lines and seems to suggest the rolling out of the additional power lines where there is low to medium environmental sensitivity. Does that suggest then deviating from environmental impact assessment requirements? Will that be skipped? It also suggests rolling out or the enablement of IPP's construction on projects from bid window 5 and 6 urgently, taking into consideration some of the localization requirements and how that would affect the red tape. Does that mean that some of the localization requirements of those contracts would be deviated from so that they could be done quicker? And then I have more, but I just need to...
No, you are alone. Ask the questions.
I'll just get that for now.
Ask the questions. You are alone. Eat. Just eat, because I don't see another hand.
You've mentioned that significant progress has been made in dealing with sabotage, theft, and fraud of ESCOM infrastructure. Could you just highlight what do you think the most significant...
Can you repeat that question, Gov?
Excuse me?
Can you repeat this last question?
You've mentioned significant progress has been made in addressing the sabotage, theft, and fraud of electricity infrastructure. I'd just like to highlight what you think the biggest progress has been. Have you managed to isolate the syndicate which you believe is behind some of the sabotage or identified them? If so, who are they, please?
Is that all? We're really prepared for you guys. Okay. If it ends there, Ministers, is the first time I come in this briefing. Only one journalist speak. So the first question. What is it? I write badly.
How much additional capacity?
How much? Huh? Yes. How much energy required to ensure that in a short time we reach the effect as promised? PG? You must go. Can you hear? Are you able to hear him there? Okay.
Let's test it. Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Come and face the nation, PG.
Oh.
No, but if it's not working, you must come here. No, open. Just come here if it's not working. Because the nation wants to hear you. Energy in a short term and required in line with the proposed mix and so on. Thank you.
So I said good afternoon, and hopefully we can agitate you to ask more questions in a moment. So in terms of immediate power, the first issue is how do we get a better output from existing plant? And here, after long discussions with the ESCOM team, we've identified 6 power stations, let's call them the top 6, which are going to get a lot of attention in terms of maintenance. And by maintenance we mean getting parts ready, getting contracts ready, having the money available, having original equipment manufacturers available if we need them. And those top 6 power stations are Kendal, Majuba, Tutuka, Kusile, Duva, and Matla. So that's the first step. The second step is the question of getting consent from my colleague next to me, Mr. Mantash, to by what they call standard purchasing process. And here what we're talking about is current IPPs are not using necessarily all of the power that they produce, so they have surplus. So Eskom requires consent to buy surplus power that is available in current IPPs, and up to 1,000 megawatts is potentially available in the next 3 months, and that will be connected to the grid as well. There's also potential for another 600 megawatts following a similar requirement, and this is where triple exemptions are required from Section 34, from the triple PFA and from the PFMA, and those are processes my colleagues are working on. Then there have been negotiations over the last 10 days or so with our neighboring countries in the Southern African Energy Pool, and here somewhere between 100 and 200 megawatts could be available in the period of a month, depending on the contracting mechanisms and agreement on price as well. The last area is a potential 150 megawatts from gas that could be processed in Mozambique, and that could be available in the next 3 months in the short term, but I'm sure Minister Mantashe will address the gas issue later when he has an opportunity as well. So in the immediate term, it's maintenance, it's buying excess capacity that is in the country already in the IPPs, and the potential for gas to come online as well. In terms of the Eskom power lines, I think the intention on the Eskom side is not to skip EIAs, but as my colleague will explain, I'm sure there are provisions which allow for fast-tracking some of these mechanisms. And one of the key elements of the new way of doing business in government, so to speak, is to remove as much red tape as possible, and a lot of intensive work has gone into this area over the last 2 or 3 weeks under the guidance and encouragement of the President himself. On the question, Minister, Police will address the sabotage, theft and fraud.
Those were your questions, President.
No, this affects just one last.
Okay,
No, I want to overstep my mouth, don't worry. I don't want to become the Minister of Police. He's got his job, I've got mine. So the bottom line is that while some progress has been made in that regard around law enforcement issues, there's still a lot of fraud going on. And I think after the visit of the President to Tuka Power Station, he actually saw for himself the areas where some of this fraud takes place, whether it's poor quality coal, the non-delivery of fuel oil, or the overcharging for parts that are required by Eskom itself. And in those areas, there's still further work to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Minister, sorry. Minister Chrissy, environmental sensitivity.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everybody. Governor, there have been 2 frameworks that we have been working on for some months now. The first is an environmental screening tool, which is available to all environmental practitioners, and what it does is it identifies areas of low, medium and high sensitivity, environmental sensitivity, and the intention is to be able to use this screening tool going into the future in a range of situations so that we can streamline environmental impact assessments. Now, working together with this tool, we have also been working on a standard for the development and expansion of power lines and substations in identified geographical areas, and we are in the process of gazetting those areas at the moment. And based on compliance with the standard, for the development and expansion of power lines and substations, can be excluded from the need to obtain an environmental authorization prior to commencement, as long as they're being developed in areas of low and medium sensitivity. And of course, the obvious question that you would then pose is, how are you absolutely sure that this is an area of low or medium sensitivity? So there will be a requirement for a registration process, and that registration process will require a walkthrough by a qualified environmental practitioner of the area to confirm that it is indeed of low or medium sensitivity. And of course, what we know is that an area can generally be of low sensitivity, but there might be a wetland or an endangered vegetation, and of course that particular area would then need to be excluded from the development. In addition to that, it's also important to say that we have already identified 5 electricity transmission corridors, and it's when this particular infrastructure is located within those transmission corridors, and obviously we have worked with Eskom on identifying those corridors, that these provisions with regard to not needing an EIA would kick in if it's areas of low and medium sensitivity. Thank you very much.
Minister Patel.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you, Minister Gungubele. The question that was raised that I want to respond to is whether localization requirements will be deviated from. The short answer is yes. I want to provide a little bit of context and how it will work. The bid window 5 currently has a provision that requires certain components to be manufactured locally and to go into the construction of both wind and solar plants. In respect of solar plants, there has been a proposal put to government that one element of the solar plant, namely the PV, the solar PV module, should be more flexibly designated. Now, the PV module consists of the cells. They basically transform the ray of the sun into electrical energy. There's currently 2 producers of these modules in South Africa. The one is based in eThekwini, it's it's Art Solar, and the second one is based in Buffalo City, it's Seraphim. I'm advised that these 2 firms together have invested about R750 million in building local capacity for the new program that government has announced. We've taken the view in government, set out by the President in the address to the nation, that the priority is to get as much electricity, as much energy into the grid as rapidly as possible. That's fundamental. It's important for the economy, it's important for growth, it's important for industrialization and even our localization ambition across the economy. It's important for ordinary South Africans. And so therefore we've taken the conclusion to that view that the localization targets for component manufacturing, in this case the PV solar module, should not retard the speed with which the independent power producers and Eskom can get energy onto the grid. So to ensure that local content measures complement and support the rapid rollout of new energy, we've developed a flexibility framework for bid window 5. This flexibility framework covers solar PV panels specifically, because that's the area that the market has come back to us and said they would like to get some flexibility. There are two elements to this flexibility. The first is that there is a current requirement for 100% localization of PV panels or modules. This will be reduced very drastically to 35%. And these would then be produced by these two firms that I spoke of. Secondly, within this 35% that will be produced locally, if there are any delays or any challenges with supply, there's also an exemption facility that will be put in place. This is a wide deviation, and it's put in place because we believe it's most helpful to the economy, and at the same time it's been structured to enable local production of some of the demand from local producers. For future bid windows, the localization targets are intended to be incrementally increased to allow the scaling up of local production, to create jobs, and to strengthen supply chain security. Members of the media would have seen how disruptions in global supply chains have affected the South African economy, and we want to address that by building that capacity locally. And in addition, special emphasis will be placed on location of new component production facilities closer to areas that are affected by the energy transition. So that, in broad terms, sets out the approach that we've taken, a high level of flexibility and putting the priority on the rapid generation of new energy that can come onto the grid. I hope that provides sufficient context to the approach. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. Minister Kele. Security and sabotage.
Thanks, President, colleagues. 2 Saturdays ago, I was just wondering why I was invited in the panel or the visit that was undertaken by the President to some of these stations with the Minister of Energy and the Minister of Public Enterprise. I was really wondering until I sat down and I listened and I realized why the President has brought me in. You find that some GMs, general managers of these stations, they move around with the personal protectors. Not only them, their wives move around with the personal protectors, not their wives, their kids are taken to school by the personal protectors. That starts from inside these stations, where the criminals from both internal and external, they collude to steal the whole tank of diesel, the whole tank of oil coming to the company. And in the middle of grinding and working machines, there is no oil. Where the engineers will go to the storeroom to find a spare of a machine, and all those spares of machine appear on the paper, but nothing you find at the room where they're supposed to be, at the spare rooms, but all the money is paid for. That's what is happening. That will be internal. Therefore, National Commissioner, who is here, has, in collaboration with the general managers of these stations, I'm not going to mention them by names, these stations where these things are happening, has created a team. I was quite impressed when that general manager, under all those trans conditions, but still was very much expressive of police and saying they are working together. on the middle of the middle management there and people working there, between 4 and in that station, between 4 and 6 people have been arrested. We are hopeful that the whole chain of the justice system will begin to take those matters very, very serious. And indeed, there were in last financial year 210 cases that have been opened, and 191 of those people were found guilty, and some of them are doing between 10 and 15 years. So it's taken serious, especially when it comes to the copper. But maybe to demonstrate and illustrate what is happening, because it's not just on the sabotage where people they put the stones on the bottom of the truck and they put the coal on top as part of the sabotage, and all those things, they go to a machine and they begin to reduce the functionality of machine, a machine that is supposed to be taken care of in terms of service in 18 months, because it's grinding stones, it will take only 8 years. So it will take only 8 months. So, but it doesn't end there. It goes outside where is a big sabotage. People stealing the copper, stealing the lines, and all that kind of things. This has recently happened, that in Gauteng on the 16th May 2022, 5 suspects were arrested for tampering with essential infrastructure at railway line. So these are the arrests. On the 26th May 2022, 3 suspects were arrested posing as contractors. And then they get in these places as contractors, and they go there. They take the copper. They take whatever they can take as a sabotage, and they're going out to sell those things. On 28th May 2022, 3 suspects were arrested for possession of Eskom and City Power cables at an identified premises, and the estimated price for was 500,000 and 200,000. On 9th of June 2022, suspect was arrested stealing the copper that could amounted to 168,415. On the 7th of July, 2 suspects were arrested with the copper cable theft of 55,000. Gauteng on the 8th of July 2022, 1 suspect was arrested with a 10 million worth Telkom and Eskom copper. On the 22nd of June, suspects were arrested when suspicious vehicles stopped and undisclosed amount of steel pipes utilized within the mining industry were arrested. So we are doing all what we can and putting special teams to work on these things, as we have been instructed by the President to create special teams to deal with the sabotage on the infrastructure, the sabotage on the mines, Zamazamas working with the Minister here, but also working on the stations, power stations. It's not just only administrative and technical problems that might come with the load shedding, but lot of sabotage and criminality, and we are working hard to arrest those responsible for that. Thanks.
Thank you, Minister. We're getting to online now. I'm told that there are people who have developed appetite. What is online?
Thank you, Minister. Yes, indeed, we have several questions.
Several questions online, colleagues.
I'll start with Carol Payton from News 24. Minister, we have had numerous IMCs and a war room of ministers. How will this energy crisis committee be different from those previous efforts that have achieved so little? The next question is from Comrie Amabungana Center for Investigative Journalism. While one of the plans is to improve the performance of ESCOM's fleet, but few details have been provided on the scope of this intervention. How much money will be made available for additional maintenance of the ESCOM coal fleet? And what do you expect this to achieve in terms of capacity? The next question is from Lamis Omaji, News 24. Can Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, Ibrahim Patel, clarify if there will be local content exemptions and what they entail? The next one, Stephen Crotes, Newsroom Africa. Can we assume that all of the ministers on this committee are completely agreed on what will happen? That it will definitely be easier to add more power to the grid and that this will happen quickly? The next question is Alex Wailing from Reuters. To the Minister of Finance, ESCOM CEO Andrew De Ruyter has talked of 200 billion rand as a more sustainable debt burden for the utility, which is half the current level. What do you see as a sustainable amount of debt on ESCOM's balance sheet? What is your preference to arrive this? The next one is a question from Carol Payton.
Do you want to repeat your question to ask the Minister of Finance?
ESCOM CEO Andrew De Ruyter has talked of 200 billion rand as a more sustainable debt burden for the utility, which is half the current level. What do you see as a sustainable amount of debt on ESCOM's balance sheet? What is your preferences to arrive at this? The next question, Carol Payton, News 24. The plan says that ESCOM will be able to immediately dispatch interim power on an emergency basis for a period of 2 to 3 years, while ensuring transparency and cost effectiveness. What does this mean? Does it include power ships? And the next question is Siphelele Kudla, Business Report newspaper. To Minister Mantashe, your proposal for a second state-owned power utility does not seem to gain traction or enjoy support within the ruling party. How far are the moves for realizing this proposal, or has it died a natural death? The second question from Siphelele Duka to Minister Godongwana. Has ESCOM approached the National Treasury for additional funds to finance its procurement of surplus capacity from IPPs and additional capacity from neighboring countries? If so, how much does ESCOM need for this program? The next question, Kopano Gumbi, Newsroom Africa. How are you going to speed up procurement? Are you going to allow ESCOM to deviate from the PFMA? Carol Payton again from News 24. What is the view in getting a power ship to supply short-term energy?
Can you repeat that one?
Carol Payton, what is the view in getting a power ship to supply short-term energy?
Okay.
The next question, the Nene Erasmus from Business Day. Can Minister Mantashe provide an indication when the determination will be gazetted to lift the 100 megawatts licensing threshold on private generation? The next question, Anastasia Mukubu from Jacaranda FM News. Is there perhaps an update yet on the actions to be taken regarding ESCOM's debt? Also, have policing resources been deployed yet to ESCOM and specifically power stations to address the issue of sabotage? Finally, can you please update us on update? I think you wanted to say update. Can you please update us on progress with negotiations with neighboring countries to purchase additional capacity? Carol Payton again from News 24. To Minister Godongwana, will you be increasing ESCOM's drawdown from the budget, given the promise to ESCOM to fund more maintenance? And how much will that be? The next set of questions, they are from Terence Klima, Engineering News. First one, when will a ministerial determination be published to cater for all the remaining capacity available under IRP 2019? Can the IPP office accommodate the increase in bid window 6 to 5,200 megawatts within the same bid submission time frame in which days? The third question, what adjustments will be made to ensure bid window 5 projects reach financial closure in July and September? The last question from Terence Kramer. When will the storage peaking power RFPs be published? The next questions, they are from Carl Cohen, News 24. Why has it taken so long for the department you all collectively lead to recognize not only the national crisis around energy, but to take the lead with tangible interventions to address the various problems with speed appropriately? Minister Gordon, do you agree that outdated ANC policy on energy and the way it is managed and procured, as well as the party's involvement in corruption in the energy space, is partly to blame for the escalation of the crisis since 2007? When will the board of the National Transmission Company of SA be announced? Is the process being held up at the ANC Deployment Committee?
The board of?
When will the board of the National Transmission Company of South Africa be announced? Is the process being held up at the ANC Deployment Committee? Are there enough people available to take on these roles? The next question is Paul Pechiato, Bloomberg. The president indicated that the IRP will be received and will be reviewed and updated. When will this happen and when will it be released? The last question is Vikas Becker, Network 24. Minister Mantashe, what time frame are we looking at before you make a Section 34 determination in terms of the Electricity Regulation Act to enable the purchase of additional power from the existing IPPs? That's all for now, Minister.
Yeah. Made a mistake by challenging you, huh? Now we've got a lot of work to do. No, wait a bit. What I'm going to propose to ministers, all of you have questions. I'll propose each minister to deal with all the questions that are related to you. But if the question that is related to you has already been answered, you don't have to come and repeat it here. I'll start with Minister Chris. So there's nothing for you, right? Mr. Patel?
It's covered.
There's localization. Yeah. Oh, it was answered that question, you're right. Minister Ndosi, you have spoken on security. Then it's only 3. Yeah. Minister, all the billions, did ESCOM apply for money? And how long will procurement? How will procurement be responsive? Yeah. And all those issues. You will also deal with all the red tape issues.
Thank you. I was worried when I was not getting questions. Something that is common in Imbizos, when we go to president make Imbizos, all ministers get questions. I'm the only one who doesn't get them. I think the first issue we need to deal with is the deviation from the PFFMA. I think one of the things we've said, and the President has said, part of this package will require to deal with red tape. Red tape includes regulatory issues. Let me just give you an example. One of the things we found out, if you have got the 100 megawatts, people want to, Minister Mantashe raises it to 100 megawatts. You may raise it to 1,000 if you want. But if the regulatory framework is not sorted out, Minister Chris was referring to the environmental part, which she's handling, that it should be quick. There's a whole range of other processes. People have got to apply to NERSA, have got to apply for certain letters, types of application to ESCOM. So all of that regulatory thing has got to be managed. So that's part of the deal. The PFMA issues are part of that. In other words, if there's any regulatory issues such as deviation from the PFMA, to the extent that they have got to be done in order to make sure that the delivery of service is achieved, that will be done. So I wanted to start with that issue. The second issue, which may not have been raised, which I need to touch on, we need to, amongst ourselves, to sort the cost-reflective tariff debate between ESCOM and NERSA. I'm not familiar with the problems, but the sooner that matter is attended, the better for ESCOM's sustainability. The third issue is cost of maintenance by ESCOM. ESCOM has not come to us for now for the cost of maintenance, and therefore there will be no need to talk about the drawdown. There will be no need about how much that will be, how much has been requested. What we do know, the matter was raised, a figure of about 2 billion in the context was raised. On closer interaction with ESCOM, ESCOM said no, it's too early to do that, precisely because they've given the generation division 8 billion rand for maintenance. So that's what the response they've given to us. But if the need arises, we will respond to that. The big and the last question is a big check. Is a big check, depending on which time of the ESCOM debt fluctuates between 390 to 400 billion rand. There's an accepted issue, even in the marketplace, that debt for ESCOM is unsustainable. Is unsustainable. And therefore, if it is unsustainable, it poses a risk to the sovereign. Poses a risk to the sovereign. To avoid that sovereign risk, the sovereign have got to step in. That principle is kind of agreed. We'll be going to the Cabinet Lekgotla in the first week of September with a proposal to deal with that issue. What has not been settled at the moment is the quantum of that, how much will be taken by the sovereign. But the principle is there. At the moment, both Treasury officials and ESCOM officials are developing scenarios which will table before Cabinet. So ESCOM debt is an issue which is, the principle is settled, which were taken to the government, Lekgotla and Cabinet in due course. Look at those scenarios. The final quantum and the scenarios, and the conditions precedent, that people in the financial space call the CPs. The conditions precedent and conditions post the transaction will also be dealt with on the 26th of October in the midterm budget policy statement. I think I've covered my story.
Yeah. Thank you, Minister Goroban. I think Carol Patton and Kramer has got a lot of work for both Minister Gordon and Minister Mantashe. Minister Mantashe.
Thank you very much, Minister Kumbele.
and everybody. I want to start by answering the question on power ships. I did a lot of consultation trying to get a legal advice on this matter. And the answer is, anything that is not forbidden is allowed. If it's not forbidden, it is allowed. So, sourcing energy from power ships is not forbidden. If there are technicalities that they must sort out on environmental assessment and many others, they should not comply with that. But there is no power ships that are forbidden from doing business in South Africa. I think that covers that question. The second one is the idea of sovereign power generation dead. I'm sure it is of interest for many to die, but I follow resolutions that were taken over the weekend by the governing party, which is said to be not interested. I don't see anything that shows disinterest. Let me tell you what we were discussing in this regard. We're saying there are power stations that are called generators that are earmarked for decommissioning. If we want to start a second generator, it should be taking the responsibility of actually getting those power stations, your Hendrina, your Camden, your Grootfontein, and repurpose them to gas and take responsibility for that outside of the ESCOM issues that are confronted by ESCOM today. And therefore, it's not a dead idea. Then you can build on that capacity, but the starting point is on targeting the power stations that are earmarked for decommissioning. Repurpose them, don't load ESCOM with new burden, and work on that and build the capacity. Therefore, it's not a dead idea. Additional capacity from neighboring countries, I'm leaving that for Minister Kodan. I'm leaving that for Minister Kodan. Bid window 6. Is there anything that we do for bid window 6 to increase the capacity? Yes, it is. But what is important is that if we are increasing bid window 6, which is out already, we'll have to give notice of a particular time. We're discussing whether it should be 60 days or 45 days, because it will be unfair to expect people to bid for double the capacity if they are not given the notice. So we're working on that. We think of increasing that notice and give people so that new bidders can come and join the bid another 45 days or another 60 days. We'll take that decision. So we're taking serious the question of telling us to increase the capacity of bid window 6. And the important about bid windows, which is an issue that I argue for every time, is that what is nice about bid windows that is a contractual arrangement, because people commit themselves to an arrangement they will execute, and we, in exchange, all we guarantee is not support or guarantee that bid, we guarantee uptake, that's all. On why did it take so long to recognize energy crisis, I'm not sure how long is that long, because in 1998, notice was given to the state that, listen, your surplus energy is going to be exhausted by 2007. No new capacity was built. Very late in 2004, a Kusilen Mitubi bill program started in a rush, late. So the state has always noticed that there is going to be a crisis coming our way. Indeed, in 2007, that excess capacity disappeared. When is the IRP review going to start? It's already started already. The team is already looking into the assumptions, because you derive those assumptions. Somebody said the assumption we used in 2019 were wrong. And I corrected that person, said they were not wrong, they were correct, But time is going on and changes impact on the assumptions. And I said if we work too long on the assumption we make now, after 2 years they will be relevant. So let's move with the necessary speed in developing those assumptions. So that is what we are doing. So the question of reviewing IRP 2019 is underway. Lastly, Section 34 determination for additional procurement, that is ongoing. Because Section 34, though it is made to be a big issue, in reality is that we reconcile our determination with NERSA. Once NERSA and department agree, that Section 34 goes ahead. I think those are the questions that were directed to me, not unless something I've left. A minister agreed on 80 megawatts. Obviously, we are agreeing on 80 megawatts to the grid. Minister Gordon.
Yes, sir.
What are you doing with neighboring countries?
Visiting them. Let me start, Mr. Gungubele, because you will tackle the other issues about your liking of IMCs and so on. But let's say to Stephen Crotus, we are completely agreed on what the President has announced. And just to underline the point, part of what was leading to that announcement was the necessity for all of us to work differently, work with a greater sense of urgency, but also work with a greater sense of cohesion amongst ourselves as well. So that's the first point. Ms. Payton's question about dispatchable emergency power refers to either gas or the current OCGTs, which utilize diesel. And those diesel turbines can also be converted to gas turbines. But the key issue is, where do we access gas? So I'm waiting for my colleague, Minister Mantashe, to load some gas into his tanks and start delivering them so that we can power Komati, we can power the current diesel turbines with a few changes and get that going. Procurement from our neighbors, that should be concluded, as I said earlier on, in the next month, to bring in anything up to 200 megawatts. But we also Eskom is in conversation with them to see whether more power could be obtained from the power pool itself. So when those possibilities come through, they will make some announcements in that regard. Funds for maintenance. Minister Gerongwana is in a very generous mood today by saying that if he's approached, he'll make more money available. My view is that Eskom must find the cash from within its own resources, and then we'll see what needs to be done. And particularly if we can get rid of the overpricing and the rank exploitation that's happening from contractors of all sorts, which we referred to earlier on, I think a fair amount of money can be saved. As far as storage, in terms of peaking power, Eskom is looking at a new project in this regard, possibly in partnership with a private sector entity, but that's still some years off in terms of actually materializing. Kyle, congratulations on your book. You should send a free copy to the Minister of Police so that he can have a look at it on sabotage. And Minister Mantashe has addressed the question of why it took so long, as you alleged, to recognize the crisis. I think we knew the crisis, but we also must concede that there are so many agencies and departments involved, each with their own set of rules. So the big breakthrough here is setting up this centralized facility, which Minister Gungubele can address a little later, on the one hand, but also a massive reduction in red tape, particularly in terms of the number of days that each entity requires to do the work that their piece of legislation requires them to actually do. Outdated energy policy of the ANC. I don't think the ANC has any outdated policy. The IRP 19 reflected what was relevant at that point in time, under assumptions that were valid at that point in time. And as Minister Mantashe said, those assumptions are being reviewed as part of the overall review of IRP 19. In terms of boards, no, there are people who are available. We have a short list that is under consideration in government itself, and sooner rather than later, several board names need to be announced: the main ESCOM board, the transmission board, and possibly also a generation board as well. Currently, there's an internal generation board for the generation component of ESCOM. I think that's my questions. Thank you.
The next question, there are institutional questions that have been raised. There was a question that said, why did it take so long? I guess what matters, it's happening now. This is what we must celebrate. These ministers with the president have been working for quite a long time till this point. Somebody asked how different. It's been widely, plan is widely consulted. It's enjoying endorsement from various institutions, be they technical, be they political, be they commercial, different type of institution. This plan is supported, and actually South Africa has thrown the ball back to our court by saying, now implement. Now the question is asked, how different? The crisis committee is in place. I will principal these ministers. The key point is that the president has said there's a crisis committee. It's already been meeting, right? So we've been together, and what the president announced is a common message of these ministers. There could be as many different voices, but you will not find any minister outside what the president was to call. Already a number of them have spoken. I have not heard a single one speaking outside this. So there's oneness, and I think that oneness has demonstrated that there's a decisiveness to turn around. Just to remind ourselves that one of the key things, if you look at the 5 key macro demarcated issues, the one that says optimize ESCOM's capacity, the one that says accelerate and enable the investment by private sector in the generation capacity. In other words, create conditions for private sector to actually invest in the generation capacity, so that we are able to access that through the grid. Accelerate procurement. Minister of Finance has spoken about that. Accelerate procurement to ensure that we access capacity to renewables, gas, and battery storage. These are clear, demarcated areas which are meant for you to independently assess and check if the needle is moving. Rooftops and fundamentally transform the electricity sector. Those are issues, but I thought it is important to you to say, as you ask again, how different this team is going to work. Already there are results. You know, when you have got elders in a class. The other issues that we are demonstrating that work is in progress. Changes have been made to regulations on new generation capacity. We have already told you that municipalities are moving in this regard. We are saying one of the first steps President took was to revive renewable energy procurement program. It enabled that 2,205 megawatts. That's a demonstration that we are at work. A further 6,800 megawatts of solar PV being procured in terms of the current ministerial determination. Questions were asked to the minister on that determination. This additional generation capacity, we'll expect it to connect to the grid by late 2023. Another 3,000 megawatts of gas, 513 of battery storage being procured in the next bid windows. These are demonstrations that we are working differently. We're saying again in 2021, licensing from 1,200 has been raised. I can go on and on. There's already green shoots with regard to what we are doing. There is a provision. And having said all that, when we say optimize ESCOM, it's because we're saying ESCOM must be functional to full capacity. There's intervention. The Minister of Police have already spoken to you. We're dealing with the systemic underlying fraudulent activities, be it distortion of procurement processes, be it confusion about which coal, whether you've got one coal load or no coal, how many times you repeat procurement, how many times you make sure that procurements underperform so that you continue to have it. By the way, there's a strong power station, Minister Mondash. I don't know, it's Matimba, which is a positive protocol in our investigation. That station, it makes a case for the role of maintenance, because in that station is one of the old stations. It has not had problems because maintenance schedules have been adhered to. At that point, I thought you were fine with us. Thank you very much. Govern, wait. I saw your hand.
Yes, sir.
Funan, go on. Come in. Come, govern. Come.
Thank you so much. The plan also highlights spending on agreements with mining houses to procure additional capacity. Have any agreements been signed with mining houses to buy their surplus power? And if so, how much? And then the Minister of Public Enterprises outlined some of the timelines by when they hope to achieve additional 1,000 megawatts and 600 megawatts, 3 months at the most. So at which point will enough additional capacity have been procured or agreements been signed to procure them that will insulate the country from load shedding if ESCOM suffers breakdowns? Do you have a time frame by which you believe you'll be able to buy enough outside ESCOM to prevent load shedding when there are significant planned maintenance schedules or unplanned trips which are happening?
Those are last question, colleagues. Mr. Gordon and then Mr. Mantash.
I must go first.
It's a mine work.
8 counts. I can't go after my health.
Sex is rare, but
The very few mining houses at this stage have extra capacity to spend sell to ESCOM. Very few. Goldfields is constructing 40 megawatts capacity. I hope that surplus will be sold to ESCOM. Sasol does have extra capacity that is selling to ESCOM. But the rest of them are in the projects that are said to be in the pipeline. So if we say they were getting energy from them, we must take them off the pipeline and finish them, get them into generating energy. So there's nothing much to talk of getting extra capacity from mining houses. We are encouraging them to accelerate their build program.